Everyone, welcome back to Cheddar.
Today marks a fresh start for Boeing. David Calhoun will take the reins as chief executive of the embattled aerospace company. He's previously held roles at GE, Nielsen, and Blackstone. He's also been on Boeing's board for the past decade. Al Root is the senior special writer at Barron's. Al, it's always great to have you on. This change of power, this change of control comes at a pretty critical time for the 737 MAX. It's still grounded worldwide. We're almost a year now into the grounding. Do you think that Calhoun, as the new CEO, has what it takes to turn the company around?
Good to see you guys, Brad. Hope, hello. A good question. I think that he definitely has the resume to turn it around and to bring some credibility back. He spent a lot of time as vice chair of General Electric, running what they called back in the day infrastructure, which was power and aviation. So he's certainly run large organizations, certainly not a neophyte to the aerospace business. I mean, it's a tough job, but if you're looking for somebody, he's a good candidate. Now there are questions because he was on the board for 9 years, but there is a difference between being on the board and running the place day to day.
Right, and so being in those day-to-day operations also means you'll need to change the company's culture, one that it's come to light over even the past couple of days, that there is even more of this communication, conversations that have taken place behind closed doors or within the company's walls, that there was an unease about the 737 MAX, and unease is probably still a euphemism to use in this instance, knowing that it had simulation issues, knowing that you had employees that did not believe that it should ever get to the air. And so with that in mind, how do you change a company's culture after they've gone through such a crisis as this and are still finding themselves in the grips of it?
That's the million-dollar question, right? So I had this nice conversation with a Columbia business professor, and he basically said, these issues of culture, right? It basically just goes, culture is the way things are done around here. And there was clearly became a gap between what Boeing wanted to behave like and what they had started to behave like. So, it's a bit of a soft science to try and turn these things around, but Boeing, like every other company, posts its core values on its website, and the three top core values are safety, operational excellence, and integrity. So, you got to start doing things that line up with that. To Dave's credit, a couple of decisions, the first decisions, he disclosed those emails that looked terrible voluntarily. And he also, went out ahead of an FAA recommendation and said all pilots should get simulator training in a 737 MAX simulator. That was very different than the message that we had heard under Dennis Muhlenberg. So you asked the right question, and it's literally day one of Mr. Calhoun's tenure. But I think those are the kinds of things he's doing and trying to take a more proactive stance to try and turn it around. But there's a lot of work to be done, as the emails indicate.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I made the argument here earlier today about the lack of competition, which really propels a company to feel pretty arrogant, right? That was the word that a lot of people used to describe some of those communications that were revealed last week. I mean, this still does not change the duopoly that exists right now in the aircraft space. So to that extent, about the employees themselves, I mean, the business is still going to come in. Do you think that there's a tangible way we can actually measure if some of that arrogance goes away?
Excellent question. And the reason the duopoly exists is partly because, to design a plane and bring it to market, it's literally, 10 years and $10 billion. Not a lot of startups have the stomach to do that. That's more money than basically Tesla has spent over its entire existence on capital and equipment so far. So planes are very difficult to build, and that's sort of why we've naturally evolved to two players. But to your point, so what does that mean? I think that the FAA, right, there's a bucket of responsibility that comes with regulators. And I think to verify that some things have changed and that, Boeing is living more in line with its goals, I think that you have to look at regulators and oversight and start, either, better funding the FAA or having the FAA take back some of that oversight authority that it had delegated to Airbus and Boeing. And then basically, be almost, it might be a bad analogy, but be like an FDA for aircraft in terms of post-marketing oversight and and checking, even above and beyond what they already do. So it's very difficult in a duopoly. So I think it really sort of lies with regulators.
How much of this blowback do you think also permeates over into Airbus's camp as well, given that they have, as you mentioned, a similar relationship that they need to maintain with the FAA?
Well, back to Hope's question, right? It's tough because, Airbus isn't out sort of capitalizing on Boeing's woes because, it's building as many competing aircraft as it can. And these aircraft that the backlog is to be delivered over 5 to 7 years. So it's not like they can just sort of turn the switch and take market share. Airbus is probably winning, but the funny nature of the business is like we're measuring this in 1 to 2 percentage points of market share over the generation of an aircraft. So I think based on orders, the A320neo has like 58% of the market, and the 737 has 42. That's sort of probably might even go to 60-40 or something like that. But that 60-40 split is the aerospace equivalent of Airbus killing Boeing in the marketplace, and so Boeing will still carry on, and then obviously they'll have to devise and design better planes out into the future. But to your point, you don't see like Airbus sort of like grandstanding or anything like that because they want to keep their side of the street clean while they let Boeing worry about theirs.
Yeah, and just really quickly on compensation, of course, the company, Boeing had to respond to all the criticism around it. Do you think that this is going to be structured differently now going forward because of that criticism?
Like Dave Calhoun's compensation?
Well, when Muhlenberg left, right? I mean, the revelation of course, how much contractually he was going to get regardless raised lots of eyebrows and everything, and the company had to actually come out and say no, but he's not getting severance.
Right. He walks away over his 4+ years as CEO with about $150 million, give or take, in total payments, including pensions. Not bad. American CEOs are very well compensated. We'll try not to make a political comment. What Boeing said when they released the details of Dave Calhoun's compensation is there were, enhanced clawback provisions, which means basically, I guess he has to work a little harder for it. But he will also be well compensated, especially if he can get the max. There's a like a $7 million bonus payment that's tied specifically to the max. So CEOs make their money, I suppose.
Just very quickly, Al, on the public perception of the 737 MAX, has the most recent kind of unveiling of texts of messages that have been exchanged internally at the company, do you think that's moved the needle among Americans, among the international flying population of passengers, and the airlines themselves? Has it moved the needle in saying, I don't want to fly on this, or I don't want to purchase more of this aircraft, knowing that there was not that confidence internally within the very thing they were producing?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's sort of counterintuitive. The Wall Street brokerages keep surveying flyers and asking how they feel about the MAX. The longer this goes, actually, counterintuitively, the less focused people seem to be on it. So, in recent surveys that have been published by Wall Street, 40 to 50% of people are sort of, very tuned into what's going on with the MAX. That's actually down from, 50 or 60% a few months ago. So it really seems almost crazy, but there's a counterintuitive thing at work. Regardless, there's going to be a lot of trust to win back, and airlines have a whole bunch of plans to try to win back trust. But if you look at a company like Ryanair or Southwest, I mean, they're all 737 fleets. So they basically have to win back trust, and they have to, demonstrate safety either with, test flights or other ways to make sure people feel comfortable on these planes. That issue isn't going away. That's sort of the next issue coming down the pike.
Right, and it's a shame that it has to be 100% safe, for that confidence, and the other threshold is an accident. I mean, it's a horrible situation to be in. Al, thanks so much as always for being on. Al Root is a senior special writer at Barron's. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.